Hello and welcome. Aquarister here, coming to you with another video, and today we are going to be talking about the Life Staff, a little bit about why I like running Life Staff so much, and why I really think it's a good idea for everyone to at least try the healer role, even if you're not really that into it. I really do think there are some key points as to why it's important for everyone to at least try it, learn it, understand it. It really will help your positioning in other positions and all that, but we'll get into that further. So let's take a look into the life staff itself. All right, looking at the life staff, it is our main healing weapon in New World. It was actually our only healing weapon until the Void Gauntlet came out. Void Gauntlet's going to be more of your secondary heals. Life staff is still primarily healing. Does have light and heavy attacks, does nature damage, can apply obviously healing, but also buffs to your teammates. It's a really good overall support weapon. I hope they do add more support weapons in the future, but for now, having one main primary healing weapon and other secondary weapons to go along with it is still really fun. But let's take a look at the different skills, abilities, all of that. So looking on the healing tree, as you can see, this is kind of the setup that I always run for life staff. I don't really change it up too often outside of some more specific scenarios, specific dungeons, anything like that. I might change up a few things, but for the most part, this is my go-to build for both PvE and PvP. For abilities, I always run Divine Embrace, Sacred Ground, and Orb of Protection. The only ability I really swap from time to time is Orb of Protection. Occasionally, I will run Splash of Light, depending on kind of what we're up to. I don't really run Beacon too much anymore. The cooldown for Beacon is really long, and so it's a long time to be without heals when Orb of Protection essentially can heal for the more in the long run of it. So that's why I end up running Orb of Protection. I did used to run Beacon quite often in the past, and have since changed. Now, for the perk side of things, on the healing side, I'm always going to get Absolved, so our light and heavy attacks no longer consume mana. That's really huge as a healer to really manage your mana and not use more than you really have to. I also use Blissful Touch, so then our light attacks are now healing for 16%. These two perks, for sure, you're going to want. The healing with your light attacks doesn't seem like it's much, but depending on your positioning, if you can position yourself kind of in the background, your teammate in front of you, and then from there you have the enemy, so you're shooting the enemy with your light attacks, and all the meanwhile your light attacks are also healing your team. So from a positioning standpoint, you can really utilize that healing output from the light attacks. I also like to run Revitalize when you hit with a light attack, reduce life staff ability cooldowns by 5%. So you're essentially getting a refreshing move in a way, just in the life staff itself. So if you don't have it on your life staff, you can still utilize that in some way. And then the last perk that I use on the healing side is going to be Intensify. So when you hit with a heavy attack, gain a stacking 10% bonus to healing effectiveness for 10 seconds. It's a huge healing buff. 10 seconds is quite a long time for one, and you can have different perks that extend that time. But a 30% healing bonus output is massive. That's a really big healing output that if you don't have that, you are missing out pretty much on just like free heals at that point. So I do highly recommend running that. We can kind of go over stacking that 30% a little bit quicker. And then for our ability perks on this side, Sacred Ground, you're going to want to go all the way down. Divine Embrace, I usually only go to the second one. You can go to the third, but I've found that just going to the Shared Struggle is just fine. You're still going to get a lot of healing, plus when we start talking about the actual weapon perks, that'll come into play as well. And we want to make sure we get Divine Blessing. So when you heal an ally below 50% health, they are healed for 30% more. So it's another 30%, plus you take the 30% from your heavy attacks, and anyone below 50% health, you are now healing for essentially 60% more if you stack those two. So that's healing side. For protector side, for the ability, obviously we have Orb Protection. We do go all the way down to make sure we can get that splash. Being able to affect all allies within a 3-meter radius is very good for this, especially in OPR and stuff. So I do highly recommend running the full deal on that. for our more passive perks here, Bend Light is one that you always want as a healer. If you don't have it, you're just missing out on 20% healing for no good reason, because it's literally just a dodge. There's no cooldown to it. So every dodge that you make, it resets that 5-second cooldown to make your heals 20% stronger. So that's huge. I always run Protector's Touch. I know not everyone does, but the 15% Fortify for 3 seconds doesn't seem like a very long time, but it has saved me in a lot of situations where that little bit of Fortify just gave me that little bit of extra life, you know, kept me alive a little bit longer. So I always run it personally. Protector's Strength, another one that's really, really essential to run. If you have a buff, you heal for 20% more. So again, 20% buff. I believe it does even get triggered off of Bend Light, because when you receive the dodge and you receive the healing buff, I believe it considers that a buff. So essentially when you dodge, you're doing 40% more healing. So these two go hand in hand. For sure, I recommend those two. And then the Glowing Focus, so your life staff buffs you grant 20% longer. So that I stack. So from here, any buff that's granted by a life staff is increased, or is lasts 20% longer. So that includes any of my fortifies, any of that stuff. It should include the fortifies at least. But I know it does include the intensify. It does increase the time for that. So this is the generalized layout that I run for my life staff. As far as the abilities go, perks, all of that. This has been, I've tried a lot of different builds, tweaking various things, and this is kind of what I've come to that works the absolute best for myself. So definitely, you know, if you wanted to start somewhere, you can definitely start here and kind of tweak it as you need. But again, this has worked for me, so I hope it works for you. Next, let's go over the attributes and kind of see what I run on that side on average. For attributes, you're going to see that I run it very similar to I've done in other videos, where I run 117 con and the rest being in focus. Reason being is I like to take the consumables from the events that give you 33 con. So it's a lot cheaper than buying the roasted rabbit. That's the 40 con food. So I end up going with the 33 con and just kind of set up my attributes accordingly. And then I put the rest into focus to increase healing output. And then again, depending on my secondary, I might go a little bit into something else, but for the most part, this is what I almost always will run for my attributes as a healer. You do get all the different perks. You know, not all of these are the absolute best to have, but the focus perks really are nice. You know, 20% healing output, 20% duration on casted buffs. So we do get some really, really good perks out of that. And then at the 150 mark for con, then we get the 10% to critical damage taken. So then for PvP, it's a lot more useful in terms of keeping us alive. But that's what I run for attributes. Next, let's just take a look at some of the gear and perks. Okay, so taking a look at our gear now. As a healer, I always run light armor. I used to run medium armor, occasionally heavy, but I used to run a lot of medium until they changed up the way armor works. So now it used to be in medium armor, you'd get a slight buff to healing, I believe it was. And light, you would just get a little bit more, and then heavy, it'd be no buff to healing. And now they changed it where light armor gets a 30% bonus to healing, medium gets just no bonus but no debuff, and then in heavy, you actually get a 30% reduction to healing. So it's kind of tricky. They changed some of that up, and I know that there's going to be some other changes coming to armor and all that, so we'll see how that kind of adjusts things. But currently, light armor is just kind of the way to go. I have seen some medium armor healers, but you can definitely, and I myself have actually tried some medium armor builds since they changed that stuff, and have found that the healing output is definitely lower. You know, I'm sure there's some people who have gotten used to it and are pretty solid at medium armor healing, but in general, the mobility, the extra healing, all of that is really, really nice in the light, so I do recommend light armor currently. For perks on our weapons, though, or on our gear and weapons, we have 3 main perks that I would recommend couple of them being more specific than others as far as like if you want to make sure you get them. One being Fortifying Sacred Ground. As a healer, we always want to have Fortifying Sacred Ground. It's a huge help to our tanks, to our DPS, to ourselves, to everyone around us. It's a 10% fortification for 5 seconds as long as they get healed, so that's pretty huge. Yes, I'm still playing. So with that 10%, you know, we can stack that with Orb of Protection, get a nice 25% fortification for ourselves and teammates with that. So I do highly recommend Fortifying Sacred Ground as a healer. The other perks that you can look at are Refreshing Divine Embrace, which I got on my gloves here. And then the other one, which I have on these pants, are Mending Protection. For myself, if I have to choose between Mending Protection and Refreshing Divine Embrace, most of the time I will take Refreshing Divine Embrace because the cooldown reduction is really, really nice and you can really pump those out. Mending Protection, still a really, really good perk to have. It's just for myself, if I'm going to pick one or the other, I'm going to pick the Refreshing Divine Embrace because I can pop off 2 Divine Embraces pretty quickly within each other. And the Mending Protection, it's 3 seconds of increased healing output, but for me, again, I've just found that it's more useful with a Refreshing Divine Embrace if I have to pick between the two. So, next, we'll look at the weapon itself. So right here, I've got Will of the Ancients. This is a classic. You can't really go wrong with this one. Having Refreshing Move, Refreshing, and Blessed on a life staff is fantastic. If you want that, you can get it from the Lazarus Expedition. Drops fairly often, I would say, for a lot of people, but can take a little bit of time for others. Just depends on your RNG luck. But that's a really, really good one. Another one is going to be Reluctant Savior. This I use when I'm a little bit more on the DPS side of things. You get the Refreshing Invasion, and then you also get Chain Nature, so it does a little bit of extra damage. I do like that from time to time, depending on what build I'm running. And then the last one, which I actually don't currently have, but I'm going to be grinding out to get, is the the Life Staff Crystal Core, something like that. Not Crystal Core. Item. But the life staff that I'm thinking of, I can't remember the name right now, but it has Blessed, Refreshing Move, and Divine Embrace on the weapon. So having it on the weapon is huge because as you're casting Divine Embrace, you'll actually get a faster cooldown as well. You can also get Mending Protection on your life staff, and it wouldn't be bad either. I don't recommend Sacred Ground, and I haven't tested it to see if they've changed it at all, but it used to be with Sacred Ground, if you would lay it down, the second you would swap weapons, that fortifying would no longer apply. It is about a 5% increase in fortification, so it's not a huge buff, but it is a little bit more. In my opinion, though, even if it were to stay after you swap weapons, I would still say it's probably worth keeping Divine Embrace or Mending Protection on your weapon, as the buff seems to just be a little bit more worthwhile. But yeah. So that is the weapon gear perks that I normally run for our jewelry. I normally run this amulet, so then our fortified lasts 30% longer, divine health, extra healing income, helps keep us alive a little bit easier. Ring, I have a few different rings that I swap around to. I always have Hardy and Sacred for my healing rings. The third perk swaps around between nature damage, life steal, and I might have one other one that I'm not thinking of, but usually nature damage or life steal. I know some people run refreshing as well, kind of up to you. And then for earring, I just got this earring and I've really been loving it, but I have Refreshing Toast, Focus, and Purifying Toast. The Purifying Toast is fantastic to be able to remove debuffs. Yeah, it's really, really nice. I've been able to remove, all different debuffs that in general would have really been bad for me. So I do highly recommend Purifying Toast. It seems to work really well for healer builds, and this earring has worked out fantastic for me. So next, I suppose we can look at some of the abilities, kind of how some of that stuff stacks, and kind of go from there. Now that we've looked at the perks, the weapons, the build itself, now let's take a look at some of what we were talking about with stacking the heals. So first, we're going to take out our life staff, And I'll show you the very first healing buff that we can apply, which is just a roll. As you can see, increased healing is, or your healing is increased by 20%. We can get that going. Heavy attack. Your healing is increased by 10%, right? Healing is increased by 10% times 2 and by 3. And as you can see, it's 15 seconds long, right? So 15 seconds long. Normally that's only supposed to last 10 seconds. But because we have all these different buffs on our life staff, it gives us 15 seconds of time. Plus, every single light and heavy we're applying is giving us fortification. So see, we're constantly able to keep 3 perks or 3 buffs on us at all times. See that? So that's where with life staff, being able to stack your healing really quickly is really important. So let's say I'm playing with my life staff hammer, I switch to hammer, and I lose all my buffs, right? When I switch back to life staff, I'm going to be working on getting my heavies back. So see, you can get them back pretty quickly, and then you add that on top, you know what I mean? Look how many buffs you can grant to ourselves, and we're able to keep those 3 buffs constantly going, plus keep that going. So essentially you can keep a constant flow of healing coming from your orb. So that's the whole thing with life staff. From what I've found with the way I play, I'm a little bit more aggressive of a healer. I don't like to run from the fights as much. So for me, when I swap weapons to my hammer, my great axe, anything that I'm running, when I swap back, my first priority is get those healing stacks back. So I try my absolute hardest to just stack the healing buffs, get that 30% buff back, throw in a roll here and there, throw in the orbs, you know, we're tossing all that. And you'll really notice your healing numbers and your healing output going up. You'll find that you might not even need to use your Divine Embrace as often if you're keeping your Sacred Grounds and your orbs going at a good pace, plus light attacks and all that. You will notice a very, very nice increase in damage in healing once you start focusing and thinking about how the different healing stacks. But yeah, that's kind of how I like to stack it. Again, I'll show you one more time. Let's say we swap hammer, big slam, shoot, dodge, shoot, dodge, shoot, and we're at our 30% plus 20% plus another 20% because of the fact that we have this. We're stacking a 20, 20, and a 30, so it's a 70% healing bonus. Again, if you start paying attention to those healing stacks, you'll notice a pretty big difference. Looking at life staff and kind of seeing what it can do should kind of help give an idea as far as, you know, if you're a DPS or a tank, the capabilities of what your healer is able to do. One of the big things that I've been stressing to a lot of people, especially people returning to the game or newer players, is that when you have a targeted heal like a Divine Embrace or even a Sacred Ground, anything that's going to target someone like that, that person must be in your line of sight. There is a way that you can kind of get around that, but in the chance that they patch that or change it for whatever reason, I just try to position myself in a way where I am able to get in the line of sight of my teammates, and in turn, as a DPS or a tank, you should be able to get within visual range of your healer. Obviously, every situation is a little bit different, but if you are a DPS or a tank and you say, hey, I'm going to try out the healer role, I'm just going to see, you know, what it's about. If you're not into it, I still think it's very worthwhile running, because once you have an understanding of what your healer is capable of, you then have an understanding of where your positioning needs to be. You can understand, you know, all right, I need heals. Where do I need to be to get those heals? Not just, where's my healer at? Where do they need to be? Like, why aren't they here? It's not always the healer's responsibility to get to a position in which they can heal you. A lot of times it is up to you as a DPS or tank to get in a position that allows the healer to better benefit you. Now, that's not to say a healer should be standing still just pumping heals like this, but if there's a safer area, these are the enemies, and your healer's back here, you probably don't want to stand way over there where I can't get to you. So that's where, again, you know, a lot of times I'll see a DPS go off on their own or go somewhere and it just doesn't, I can't get a heal over there. Most healers can't, especially if they're running away from you out of range. So I got a better understanding, for the other roles when I heal, just because I understood what the capabilities of the healers are. Obviously, you can have some extremely good healers that can heal you through situations that others might not be able to, but you don't want to always assume that that's what you got for healing with you. So the better you understand the healer role and understand what their capabilities are, the better you're going to position yourself as a DPS or a tank in a way that's going to allow you to more or less stay alive more and get the heals. All right, well, we went over the life staff build that I run, the various armor and perks that I like to run with it, and kind of how I stack my healing and kind of go about some of that. So thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. If you did enjoy the video, please subscribe. Hit that thumbs up button. It really does help me a lot. I am going to be bringing more weapon videos coming with the greatsword coming up as well. Do expect a healer greatsword build video. Once it's fully released, I'll get something together and we'll start getting those life staff greatsword healers out in the world. But for today, that is going to do it for me. So thanks for watching. Feel free to stop by a stream on Twitch. I do stream on Twitch throughout the week. I'd really appreciate it. We'd love to have you. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.